Oh no, here comes Jim Mad Dog Mattis. This is Donald Trump's former defense secretary. He left near the end of 2018. He was clearly not happy with the direction that Donald Trump took on a number of issues. First of all, let's be clear. Mad Dog is a conservative. And that's why he was happy to take the job with Donald Trump in the first place. I do not agree with him on many issues, including, most importantly, foreign policy, which was his job as defense secretary. So I'm giving you that context. This is important. This is nobody's liberal, okay? And so he left, for example, over Donald Trump's withdrawal from northern Syria and leaving the Kurds to their own devices. And so, look, I don't think that we should have done that to the Kurds, but I don't agree with Jim Mad Dog Mattis about whether we should or should not leave Syria. I give you that context because he just blitzkrieged Donald Trump. So this is a right-wing general, one of the most respected generals we have in the country, who was Trump's defense secretary. And he left, and then he did not want to talk badly about Donald Trump for a long time. In fact, he said, look, I owe it to the people that still are serving their country and that are there to not go after Donald Trump and speak ill of him yet. But you could tell he was barely containing, because he said at that time, there's a period in which I owe my silence. It's not eternal. It's not going to be forever. Well, apparently we found out what his limit is. It's this. It's the George Floyd protests and how Donald Trump has handled it, especially when he cleared out peaceful protesters from in front of the White House to go do a photo op at St. John's, and that's where Mad Dog said, "That's it. I got to speak out." So I'm going to read you big parts of his scathing statement against his former boss Donald Trump because I think it's so important. So he says, "I watched this week's unfolding events angry and appalled. The words equal justice under law are carved in the pediment of the United States Supreme Court. This is precisely what protesters are rightly demanding." Look at that. From a conservative right-winger, okay? And he says it's a wholesome and unifying demand, one that all of us should be able to get behind. We must not be distracted by a small number of lawbreakers. The protests are defined by tens of thousands of people of conscience who are insisting that we live up to our values as people and our values as a nation. We must reject and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution. Damn, he just said Trump makes a mockery of the United States Constitution. Look, this is the warm-up act. This is now me saying, look, I might disagree with him on other issues and foreign policy and military intervention, etc., but that's a hell of a statement, and it accurately describes the protest, which is so important, because Donald Trump, Fox News, all the hate mongers on there like Tucker Carlson are going around trying to pretend that all of the protests are nothing but looting and burning down buildings and rioting, and that is just not remotely true. So it's great to see a conservative like this say, no, the overwhelming majority of the protesters are peaceful and are asking for a very legitimate redress of grievances here. And so, of course, he's absolutely right about that. But now he gets into Trump saying he's making a mockery of the Constitution, and he ain't halfway done. So he says, Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. Now, remember, he was in the cabinet for several years. So he knows firsthand that it's not just appearances, it's not fake news. He worked with the man for several years. He's like, no, it's true. He does try to divide us. He goes on to say, quote, "We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership." 2 points there. One is the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis by those particular police officers are not an accident. He's saying when you have a leader like Trump purposely trying to divide us for so long, this is part of his success in dividing us. And that is what leads to things like George Floyd getting killed by those cops. That is, then you have the legitimate protests who are angry about that division and want to be treated equally, as is in our Constitution and literally carved into our buildings in Washington, D.C. So he accurately assesses that issue and lays the blame at least partly on at the feet of Donald Trump, which is also true. But at the end there, he also talked about without mature leadership. Well, that's another thing that we tell you about Donald Trump. Here's a guy who worked with him who says, yeah, of course he's a child. Of course he is. He's Joffrey Baratheon. That's me. But he's clearly pointing to no maturity at all in leadership, just a childish insecurity. It is obvious to anyone who spent even a minute with him, working with him. And obvious to us when we haven't worked with him. All you have to do is watch him. How could the MAGA people and the Republican voters not see what a child he is? If you remember, before he got elected, even when he was running for president, he would and a lot of tweets with, baby, sad. I mean, sad already is a funny thing to say at the end of a tweet, let alone if you're a grown up and you're not trying to be ironic. But baby? You could tell it's what his dad used to call him. Oh, you're such a baby. You're so sad. And that's what he's acting out here. And he never grew up beyond that. And he was, since his dad gave him $413 million, he's one of the most spoiled people in the country. He's never had to have accountability. He went bankrupt 6 times. His dad bailed him out almost every single time. The last time might have been the Russians. But anyway, either way, he was bailed out, never felt any of the consequences of his immature actions. Now, back to what General Mattis is saying. This is, I mean, the more you go in, the harsher it gets. He says, instructions given by the military departments to our troops before Normandy invasion reminded soldiers that the Nazi slogan for destroying us was divide and conquer. Our American answer is, quote, in union there is strength. We must summon that unity to surmount this crisis, confident that we are better than our politics. Meaning better than our politics, i.e. Donald Trump. That's what I'm writing this letter about. And for him, in the context of deeply criticizing Donald Trump, to bring out that Nazi analogy, holy cow. He just compared Donald Trump, his former boss, to what the Nazis are doing. I'm not sure I've ever seen a former cabinet official this deeply criticize the president, let alone while the president is still in office. But he's right to point out unprecedented times. We've never had a president like this who doesn't care to unite us, who doesn't even pretend to unite us, who actively enjoys dividing us and is obsessed with himself. And you know why he did that action that put Mattis over the top, where he cleared out the park in front of the White House and walked, including with defense and military officials, which is what Mattis is going to get to in a second, because he was being called bunker boy. And even the Republicans and conservatives like Tucker Carlson, that's why I mentioned him earlier, were saying he wasn't man enough to crack down on the protesters and that he was hiding in a bunker. Today, he had a hilarious excuse to Sean Hannity. He's like, no, I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't going down to the bunker to protect myself. I was going down there to inspect it. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. Even MAGA guys don't believe it. Oh yeah, in the middle of unrest where there's people at the gates of the White House. I mean, that's the one time I happened to, just go down there and inspect it. Come on, you're laughable, dude. All right, guys, by the way, all of you using YouTube Super Chat and that are Young Turks members on YouTube, I see your names, and that was Chris Hayden, who just, Cindy Hayden, who just became a member. Super appreciated. It makes this show possible. We can't do it without you guys. We do this show together. In fact, we're united together and stronger that way. And thank you to everybody who uses YouTube Super Chat. Let me keep going with Mattis. He said, when I joined the military some 50 years ago, I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Never did I dream that troops taking that same oath would be ordered under any circumstance to violate constitutional rights of their fellow citizens, much less provide a bizarre photo op for the elected commander-in-chief with military leadership standing alongside. Now, He's calling out military leadership there. A lot of people have been calling the defense secretary, current one, Mark Esper, out for joining that walk. Now Mark Esper's, if you will, walking it back a little bit, saying, when we started walking, I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know what we were doing. That's not a good look for the defense secretary. And I don't know if that's true or untrue, but either way, that looks terrible. Mattis is calling him out partly, other military leaders out. And I'm going to tell you at the end what his real main point here, why he's doing this. That's the most important part. I'm going to get to it in just a minute. But one more thing there. Notice he said elected commander-in-chief, meaning he didn't earn it. Okay, he ain't no real commander. So we're getting near the end here. He says, we must reject any thinking of our cities as battle space that our uniformed military is called upon to, quote, dominate. At home, we should use, and battle space and dominate were put in quotes for a reason, because Trump said we got to dominate those. Trump said we got to dominate those areas. So he says, at home, we should use our military only when requested to do so on very rare occasions by state governors. Militarizing our response, as we witnessed in Washington, D.C., sets up a false conflict between the military and civilian society. It erodes the moral ground that ensures a trusted bond between men and women in uniform and the society they are sworn to protect, and of which they themselves are a part. Keeping public order rests with civilian, state, and local leaders who best understand their communities and are answerable to them. And that is why you can't, one of the many reasons why you cannot have military acting within the country. He's right to point that out. Everyone who's pointed that out is right, because if we if you empower the military to act as a police force inside the country, one, they are not accountable because they're not part of the elected system of government. That's what Mattis is pointing out. The second part that I said the minute he did that Rose Garden approach was, if you send in the military with weapons to police our streets, you are authorizing them to kill U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. Now, it's one thing if police have to do it under extraordinary circumstances, and that is what started this mess in the first place. It's another thing when you send the military. And I had a guest that you'll see tomorrow on the show. I taped an interview today. It's Dr. Rashad Ritchie. He's a great talk show host and scholar from Atlanta. He talked about the unrest in Atlanta, but he made a number of great points. And one of them was, he said, look, all these protests started because of state violence, police violence against African Americans. And Donald Trump's answer to that was more state violence. Not I hear you, not I understand what you're saying, and look, there are things that we have to work on. No, the answer was, oh, you're complaining about it, or you have legitimate issues, or he doesn't think they're legitimate. You have grievances about state violence. Oh yeah, I'm going to dominate your battle space with even more state violence. It's awful. By the way, the interviews now start at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, leading into the Young Turks at 6 p.m. Eastern. YouTube.com/TYT. You can see it right here. And if you're a member, you can get any of our shows anytime, depending on the level of membership. And the join button's down below. In fact, real quick before I give you the last quote, Michael Anthony Avalon Centeno just joined, and Spooky's mama also did. And thank you guys. And Ajay just pointed out he's a member. Remember the Reichstag fire. Well, look, we're all worried about that. We're all worried about what Donald Trump might do next to seize more power and use the military more on our home soil. So let me read the last quote and then get to why Mattis is doing this, because it's related to that comment. And I did this out of order in his statement, but at one point he says, we do not need to militarize our response to protests. We need to unite around a common purpose, and it starts by guaranteeing that all of us are equal before the law. Okay, so now Mattis is doing it partly because he's frustrated, partly because he was there and he knows what a monster and a clown Donald Trump is better than we do. I'm amused that some of the right-wingers, including some I see here, saying, oh man, Cenk doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, okay, that's normal. You think that General Mattis, who worked with Trump for years, doesn't know? I can't wait. And you think, by the way, tick, 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 until Donald Trump goes and says General Mattis doesn't know anything about the military, doesn't know anything about anything. I know more about the military than he does. You know he's going to do it. You know he's going to attack him. I'm not a guy who says the generals know best. There's a reason why we elect a commander-in-chief, and the general should not try to override his foreign policy. You signed on for Donald Trump's foreign policy when you elected him. That is not what this is about. But if Trump claims that he knows more about the military than General Mattis, that's absurd, beyond absurd. And if he tries to outman him, literally laughable, LLOL, literally laugh out loud. All right, so Mattis is doing this not just because he's frustrated, but guys, he's sending a message to the rest of the military: do not go along with this madman. Because if he starts using the military inside the country, and then he says, I didn't really lose the election. Hey, all he's got to do is get the military to say, yes, Mr. President, you did not lose the election. I don't know if you guys get the gravity of the situation. Most of you probably do. I'm not sure the mainstream media does. If he gets the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to say, nope, Donald Trump is still president, no matter what happened in the election, especially because he's going to have excuses. He's already set up all the excuses. Oh, mail-in ballots are not legitimate. Oh my God, I could move the election if I want. I mean, he's got 1,000 excuses. If the chairman of the Joint Chiefs says, no, yep, Biden didn't win, Trump won. Now, the other generals that are a part of the Joint Chiefs would then have to say to the chairman, that is not true. Then we have an absolute disaster on our hands. So what Mattis is saying here, it's mainly intended at the military, saying, remember what your role is. Your role is not to do a coup inside the country. Your role is not to follow this madman. Your role is to protect the Constitution. The Constitution is more important than any one man or even a president. So that's why he felt the need to come out there. When he saw, and he mentions it there, when he saw the military leaders walking with Trump in that photo op, and in his view, apparently aiding and abetting Donald Trump's overreach here and violations of the Constitution, making a mockery of the Constitution, as he said, that's when he sent out this flare saying, no. Whatever you do not go along with this. So I hope the military listens to him. And it's a very important warning, and it should not be taken lightly. So Mad Dog off the top rope, and exactly right in what we needed at this time. See, we can put aside all of our other differences to find common ground to make sure that we actually protect the sanctity of this democracy, this country, and this Constitution. All right. Tomorrow, check out the interview at 5:30 with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, and then the main show at 6 o'clock. Love you guys. See you soon.